I reviewed the Creality CR-10 3D printer a few weeks ago, and overall I liked it a lot. In fact, I think it's just about the best value in 3D printers today. So I was very interested when GEARBEST.com offered to send me an enlarged version of the printer, the CR-10 S4. Now, I paid for the original CR-10 I reviewed with my own money, but this printer has been supplied to me for review by GEARBEST at no cost. I just had the original CR-10 on an IKEA coffee table, which worked okay, but I decided to get some utility shelves and assemble them as a long workbench so I could have both CR-10s side by side. The Jabba in the background is a vinyl sticker from Fathead, by the way. Somehow it seemed appropriate. The CR-10S4 is very similar to the original CR-10 in many ways, so if you haven't seen my original review, I would recommend checking that out first, since most of the things I mentioned there will apply to this printer as well. In this video, I'll mostly be talking about the differences between the two machines, so that you can decide whether it's worth it to go for the bigger model. The most obvious difference is that the S4 has a build volume that's 400 millimeters cubed, or around 16 inches cubed, as opposed to the regular CR-10, which has a build volume of 300 by 300 by 400 on the vertical. When you see the two of them side by side, the S4 actually makes the regular CR-10 look kind of small, which is kind of incredible, especially in this price range. You can get printers with similar print volumes, but they generally cost thousands of dollars compared to $700 or $800 or even less for the CR-10S4. We'll talk about what this difference in build volume really means in a minute, and I'll show you a number of things that I've printed on it as well, but before we do that, I wanted to talk about some of the other differences between this and the original CR-10. Now, Creality had released a previous version of this same printer with fewer features, but this one is based on the CR-10S design, which is an upgraded version of the original CR-10. And so I guess technically this one should be called the CR-10S S4, but that's a little clunky. Aside from some minor differences in the firmware, such as showing the percent of the print that's been completed, the upgrade basically gives you three things. First is the ability to recover from a power outage. This is a pretty nice feature to have, especially since prints on this machine can take several days. I'll demonstrate it here by printing a Benchy. If I turn off the printer's power to simulate a power outage, then turn it back on again, you'll see that it has the information for the file I was printing still on the screen. So as you can see, I was about 11% done with the print when it died. It says 43 minutes on the screen, and I think that's because it's including the warm-up time. So I just choose Resume Print from the menu, and once it warms back up, it will start printing again. The only real issue with this is that because the nozzle stops in place when the power is removed, it can sometimes leave a little dimple on your print, but it's better than having it fail completely. Another new feature is the filament runout sensor. This is just a simple sensor that you thread the filament through, which will pause your print if your filament runs out. Since it's not uncommon for big prints to use more than one roll of filament, this is definitely nice to have. I'll demonstrate again with our friend, the Benchy. So if I cut the filament running into the machine, I can simulate running out of filament. It takes a little bit of time for it to go all the way through the machine and activate the sensor, but when it does, the head will automatically stop printing and return to home position, and the bed and the nozzle will start to cool off. That's probably a good thing, since you don't necessarily want those heated for hours at a time if you do run out of filament, but it could be a bit of a problem if you need to have bed adhesion for a particular model and your bed ends up cooling off. So anyway, the filament has now run all the way through, and it actually has dislodged the sensor partially there, but it has run all the way through. The head is now stopping, and you can see on the screen it says error change filament. So I'll go ahead and do that now. I've changed the filament, and I just go onto the screen here and select Resume Print as before. And once it heats back up, it will start printing again. I did have some issues with the filament sensor stopping the print even though the filament was still there, and it happened a number of times, especially during one particular long print, which was rather frustrating, but I think it may have been due to the kind of filament I was using. It had some kinks in it or something. But I haven't had the problem since then, and I haven't heard of other people having it either, so I'm going to say it's not that big of a deal. The other major upgrade is that you have 2 lead screws for the Z-axis instead of just 1, as on the regular CR-10. I haven't noticed a major difference in quality that this has made, but it's better to have 2 than 1, I think. So those are some of the upgrades from the original stock CR-10, but in fact there are some things that are not quite as good. The heated bed, for example, takes a very long time to heat up. To give you an idea, I'll select a model with the bed temperature set to 60 degrees, and see how long it actually takes to heat up. We're starting here from 21 and 0 minutes. After about 10 minutes, it's gotten to 50 degrees. And, 50 degrees is maybe an okay temperature for printing PLA. So it took 11 minutes to get to 50 degrees, but it actually took another 11 minutes just to get to 60 degrees, which is quite a while. And I found that basically you can't go much higher than 60 unless you have some sort of enclosure or insulation on your bed. Now for me, I'm just printing PLA, so that's plenty, but it's something to be aware of. The original CR-10, for the record, takes about 6 minutes to get to 60, which is quite a difference. One other complaint I have is about bed leveling. Now the new firmware does have a bed auto-leveling option there, but that's a bit misleading because all it does is move the head to a few points on the bed for you so that you can then manually level it with a piece of paper or something like that. I haven't found it to be super useful, and I found the bed, because it's so large, to be kind of difficult to level, more so than the regular CR-10. So you can see it's just going along here, and the funny thing is it doesn't even fill the whole bed. It doesn't go to all the corners of the bed. It's actually using the regular CR-10 dimensions there. What I like to do instead of even just using a piece of paper or anything like that is to just start a print that covers a large portion of the bed, like a circular print or something, and just look at it and see if it's going down and sticking. If not, I'll eyeball it and make some adjustments on the fly, and that seems to work fairly well. The other thing that I've noticed is that it tends to get unlevel after a long print, so I think it's the weight of the plastic on the bed and also the vibration of printing tends to make it go out of level, so you do have to re-level it fairly often. The large wagon wheel style adjustment knobs that so many people like to put on the CR-10 don't fit on this model, so I had to design my own. The knobs that it comes with are kind of sharp, actually, and feel like they cut into your fingers a little bit when you use them, so I do recommend printing something. I also printed the strain relief bracket on the heat bed cable here. That prevents it from breaking off just from the movement of the bed. I did the same thing on the regular CR-10 as well. And I designed some little feet that I put on the control box here, which allows me to put the roll of filament off to the left, which I kind of prefer. If you don't have these, the box can sometimes tip over when you have a full roll of filament on it. By default, the CR-10S4 comes with these plastic strips in the aluminum frame. Mine didn't seem to fit quite right, and I actually prefer the all-black look anyway, but that was an easy problem to fix. So I'd like to introduce some of the things that I've printed on this printer. Now this is the Java idle that I made on the original CR-10, and I thought that was pretty big at the time, but I wanted to see how big I could make it on the enlarged version of the printer. So I made this. Yeah, it's gigantic. It doesn't even fit on the build plate unless I turn it sideways, which is how I printed it. Yeah, this is gigantic. I can't believe how big this is. It's by far the biggest thing I've ever printed. Now, I should note that this is completely hollow, and if it hadn't been, it would have taken much, much longer to print. So that's something you probably should keep in mind. Depending on the model you want to print, it might take a very long time to print if you wanted to make it this large. But certainly for things that are simple and hollow, it's not a problem at all. Also, there are some models that you won't actually be able to print any bigger on this machine than you would on the normal CR-10, such as this low-poly Pikachu model here. It uses up the entire Z height of the machine, and because the CR-10S4 and the regular CR-10 have the same vertical height, you can't actually print this any bigger than on the regular machine. Here's an example of something you can do quite a bit bigger on this machine, though. This is a Star Wars Aztec calendar design, kind of a wall-hanging decoration. It's very thin, as you can see. This is also a good example of how using two different colors of filament can actually have an amazing effect, even if you don't have a special printer that can handle two different colors. You just make the black first few layers, and then when it starts printing the design, you switch over to silver or whatever color you want. I will say that this wasn't the easiest model to print because you have to have the entire bed completely flat and level, and as I mentioned earlier, bed leveling can be a little bit of a challenge. Unfortunately, you can't download this model any longer. As it turned out, it had been uploaded to Thingiverse without the artist's permission. The artist's name is David Gonzalez, and I actually talked with him on Instagram for a while. He was very nice about it, but he just didn't want this out into the wild because he sells this on his own website, which I'll link below. Certainly understandable. But I did want to show it to you because it's awesome, and because it is a good example of the kind of signs and wall hangings and decorations and things that you can make with this printer relatively easily because of its large size. I actually printed this on my Dremel 3D Idea Builder and the regular CR-10, but I'm showing it to you for a reason that'll become clearer in a moment. It's a little fidget toy that has gears in the base so that you can spin it and have Pac-Man chasing his ghosts and so forth. I liked it so much that I decided to take the Pac-Man model and make it just a little bit bigger and print it out on the CR-10S4. Yeah. I thought this would make a great wall decoration, so I put some nail slots in the back so you can put it on the wall. And, having a printer this size does kind of open up creative possibilities that I didn't really have before. Now, I know a lot of people are interested in this kind of machine for printing things like helmets and cosplay costumes without having to break them up in tiny pieces. So I decided to try that myself. This is a helmet from Full Metal Alchemist. This is Alphonse Elric's helmet. And my son actually requested this because he's kind of a fan. A couple of things to note about this. I printed this right side up. I noticed that a lot of people are printing helmets upside down in an effort to save on filament and supports and things like that, and that's often not a bad approach, but in this case, it didn't make any sense to do that. I did manually put some supports in Simplify 3D under his horn and in his eyes and just in a few other places, but I should note also that if I had gone with Simplify 3D's sort of automatic support generation, which wanted to put support throughout the entire helmet, it would have taken probably 3 times as long. And as you can see here, the top came together without really any problem. There's a tiny bit of stringing on the inside of the helmet, which is, not a big deal at all. And the supports came off really nicely as well. Here's my son modeling the helmet, and it is indeed wearable, as you can see. And I think, it looks really good, actually, just as it is, without any finishing whatsoever. Since that one turned out so well, I decided to try printing this Republic Commando helmet. And I used a similar approach here regarding the supports. I didn't put anything inside except where it was necessary for the visor, and it printed just fine. The only problem I really had with printing helmets when I was searching for helmets to print on this printer was that a lot of the designs that are currently available have already been split up into small pieces for printing on smaller printers, and the designers don't often give you the full helmet. And I should also mention that printing helmets all in one go like this is not always the best approach to take. It worked out well for these particular helmets, but it really depends on the design. In many cases, it may actually be a better approach to split it up at least partially into multiple pieces. Someone asked me when I made my previous video about the regular CR-10 whether it was capable of doing fine detailed models, and that was because I had focused mostly on doing big things, which is kind of what the main appeal of the CR-10 is. But yeah, it can definitely do more detailed models like this one. This is a Bloodletter or Blood Demon model that I got off of Thingiverse. And I chose it because it's basically a worst case scenario for this kind of printer. It's got all kinds of overhangs and things that are just really hard for an FDM printer to handle. You have to use a lot of support. I don't generally like doing that because it's a pain to remove, and you often end up with a not great finish too, because the supports will leave a little bit of a mark. You can see it printing, and it's just crazy how much support it requires, especially that big spear of his just has to be supported down the entire length, really. As you can see, I started out the print with gold just to make the base a distinct color, and then switched over to the red when it got to the rest of the model there, and it looked pretty good, I think. He did end up losing the tip of one of his fingers, and some of the details a little bit obscured from all of the support material, but overall, I think it turned out well. But with these printers, I can't resist printing big things, which brings me to my last model. This is the MakerBot T-Rex model. This was printed at 200% the normal size, which makes it over 4 feet long. I used both of these printers to make this, actually. I did have a few issues with the ribs and things coming loose from the build plate at certain points, and I had to reprint those a few times. Also, the original model was meant to snap together, but because I enlarged it, it made it kind of loose, so I did have to glue the pieces together with some epoxy glue. But it turned out amazingly well, and the size in person is just very impressive. And it didn't even really take that long to do using 2 printers simultaneously, just a matter of days, really. If you've been wondering what I was printing on the printers during the video, here they are. First is a pumpkin model. I changed to green filament when it reached the top here. And it's also hiding a bit of a surprise when you put a light inside it, as I'll show you here. Pretty cool. The other one is this candy dish, inspired by the game Grim Fandango. I think they both turned out really well and just in time for Halloween. So what's my final take on the CR-10 S4? Let me put it this way. If you told me I could only keep one of my printers, this is the one I would choose. It prints well, and its size makes it incredibly versatile. That said, I think the regular CR-10 is probably the better choice for many people. You can basically buy 2 base model CR-10s for the price of this larger model, and I think the convenience of having 2 printers outweighs being able to print larger models for most people. Having 2 printers makes building large models and costumes go twice as fast after all, as long as they're already split up into pieces. That said, if you know you need to print large objects, I'm not sure there's anything that comes close to the Enlarged CR-10 in terms of value. Speaking of value, GearBest has given me a special code that will bring the price of this printer way down, so if you're interested, feel free to click one of the affiliate links below. I also have a coupon and links for the regular CR-10 if that's the way you decide to go. That's about it for today. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments, and thanks very much for watching.